The Bastille was stormed on the 14th of July 1789. The National Convention proclaimed the abolition of the monarchy on the 21st of September 1792. Louis XVI was put on trial in December 1792. The verdict was announced on the 15th of January 1793, and he was guillotined on the 21st of January 1793. All this made little difference to the Louvre, though the Tuileries Palace did become Palais National, the National Palace, and housed various revolutionary bodies. The National Convention, elected in 1792, first met on the 20th of September in the Salle des Cent-Suisses, on the first floor of the Central Pavilion. The next day it met in the Salle du Manège, or riding school, and from the 10th of May 1793 in what had been the Salle des Machines. More importantly for the future of the Louvre as a museum, on the 10th of August 1792, the Tuileries Palace, which was the residence of the royal family, was attacked by the National Guard and a mob of Parisians. It was defended by the Swiss Guards, hundreds of whom were killed. Louis XVI took refuge with the Legislative Assembly, which promptly suspended the powers of the monarchy. On the following day, the 11th of August, a commission was set up to bring together for a national museum the works of art previously in the possession of the Church and the Crown, or confiscated from fleeing aristocrats. This museum opened in the Louvre exactly 1 year later, on the 10th of August 1793, with 573 paintings, 45 sculptures, and 124 other objets d'art. Structural problems in the Grande Galerie where the artworks were displayed caused the closure of the museum between 1796 and 1801. One of the disadvantages of the Grande Galerie was the lack of lighting, as can be seen in the painting by Hubert Robert. The same painter imagined roof lights as the remedy. When the revolution began, Napoleon Bonaparte was an artillery officer in the French army. His rise through the ranks was extraordinarily rapid, and he was promoted general at the age of 24. Under the Directory, he was given command of the Army of Italy, and 26 years old, began the campaign against the Austrian Empire and the monarchs of Italy. The Italian peninsula was conquered in a year. The army entered Rome in February 1798. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign started successfully with the Battle of the Pyramids in July 1798. He lost only 300 men, while his opponents, the Mamelukes, lost 2,500. Although this campaign ended in failure, Napoleon was rewarded on his return to France by being appointed first consul in a coup which made him the virtual ruler of France. 5 years later, in 1804, he became emperor. At his coronation in Notre-Dame Cathedral, he took the crown from the hands of Pope Pius VII, who was officiating, and crowned himself. The huge painting of the coronation by Jacques-Louis David, completed in 1807, was displayed in the Louvre Museum. The museum was enormously enriched by the spoils of Napoleon's conquests, whether simply seized or granted by peace treaties as tribute to the conqueror. While the museum was being prepared, selections of these accessions were displayed in the Salon Carré and the Galerie d'Apollon on the first floor of the Petite Galerie. A Sèvres vase commemorated a Roman-style triumph which brought a consignment of treasures through Paris to the Louvre in July 1798. They included the Laocoon and the Belvedere Apollo. The Museum of Antiquities, created in 1795, was housed on the ground floor of the Petite Galerie, formerly the apartments of Anne of Austria, which had been occupied by the Bourse from 1795 to 6, and in the adjacent part of the Grande Galerie. After the completion of work on these rooms, the antiquities were displayed there from 1802, with the encouragement of Vivant Denon, who had been appointed director of the Louvre Museum. Denon had been one of the experts who accompanied the Egyptian expedition. The first consul inaugurated the Museum of Antiquities on his birthday, the 15th of August, in 1803, passing through the new entrance in the Rotonde into the museum which now took his name, the Musée Napoleon. A medal commemorated the Laocoon's place in the Musée Napoleon. In a print, perhaps of English origin, Napoleon is shown standing beside another of his acquisitions, the Belvedere Apollo. He speaks to a group of men, perhaps members of the Directory, saying, "Well, gentlemen, 2,000,000 francs." Work on the museum included the decoration of rooms which had been left incomplete since the time of Louis XIV. In 1801, in the Salle des Empereurs, formerly the Salle de Mécène, the ceiling was painted by Charles Meunier with "The Earth receiving from the Emperors Hadrian and Justinian the laws dictated by nature, justice, and wisdom." In 1802, on the ceiling of the Rotonde, Jean-Simon Barthélemy painted man formed by Prometheus and animated by Minerva. In 1807, Pierre-Paul Prudhon created a ceiling for the Salle de Diane reminiscent of that of the Henry III staircase. One tympanum was painted with Diana returning Hippolytus to Erysia after his resuscitation by Aesculapius. The other tympanum shows Hercules obtaining the golden hind from Diana. The central panel depicts Diana imploring Jupiter not to subject her to the laws of marriage. In 1804, Pierre Fontaine was appointed architect of the Louvre and of the Tuileries, which was now Napoleon's residence. He remained in that position through several changes of regime until 1848. He worked in partnership with Charles Percier, his lifelong friend. They set to work on the Salle des Cariatides in 1807, when Prince Camillo Borghese was obliged, because of financial difficulties and as a result of pressure from his brother-in-law Napoleon, to sell to the French state over 500 antique sculptures from the Borghese collection. They included the Mondragon Antinous, the Borghese Gladiator, the Borghese Hermaphrodite, the Apollo Sauroctonos, and the Borghese Vase. They are still in the Louvre Museum. The Salle des Cariatides underwent remodelling of the walls and vaulting and reopened in 1811 as the Musée des Antiques. Nevertheless, up to half the packing cases containing the antiques remained unopened when Napoleon went into exile on the island of St. Helena in 1815. Fontaine and Percier have both left paintings which give their impressions of what the interior of the Musée Napoleon should look like. Percier and Fontaine also directed their attention to the Grande Galerie, which was still a passage 460 meters long, lit only laterally. The museum director Vivant Denon wanted the greatest possible hanging space for paintings, and would have liked to have all the windows blocked up, making way for zenithal lighting. The architects resisted this idea, thinking it would make the gallery look gloomy and deprive it of one of its greatest attractions, the view of the River Seine. The compromise finally arrived at was that the gallery should be divided into sections, some of them with blocked windows and lighting from above, some of them lit from the side windows. The 6 sections would be divided by columns supporting transverse arches. In the centre, in the Pavillon Lesdiguières, would be a kind of salon, lit by windows and delimited by pairs of columns with transverse arches. At each end of this central salon would be a gallery in which the windows were blocked and skylights were at the sides of the vault. These 2 central galleries would each have a salon at the farther end, followed by a gallery lit by side windows. At each end of the Grande Galerie would be a gallery lit from above. The Grande Galerie was thus divided into 6 galleries, 4 lit from above, and 3 salons. It remained so until the 1860s. In the illustration of the wedding procession of Napoleon and Marie-Louise, the imperial couple are just passing through the central salon of the Grande Galerie. Its columns are clearly visible. The ceiling windows of the two galleries at either side of this salon can also be seen. The arch nearest to the viewer has not yet been decorated. The Salon exhibition of 1819 has spilled over from the Salon Carré into the Grande Galerie. Roof windows are visible above the cornice. François Biard's painting shows uniformed attendants announcing closing time at the Salon of 1847, in the same part of the Grande Galerie. In Patrick Allen Fraser's 1841 view of the Grande Galerie, light shines from above on the columns, while beyond them the gallery has windows on the left, but no skylights. Thomas Allom's print of 1844 again shows the alternation of lit and unlit ceilings and the pairs of columns dividing up the Grande Galerie. Another of the artworks brought to France by Napoleon was the group of 4 bronze horses taken from St. Mark's Basilica in Venice in 1797. In Paris, they were first displayed in the courtyard of Les Invalides. After that, they became part of Napoleon's plan to renovate and complete the Tuileries and the Louvre. In 1801, Napoleon had a grille placed to delimit the courtyard of the Tuileries, the Cour du Carrousel. The horses were then placed on 4 pedestals at either side of the north and south entrances through this grille. In 1806, Napoleon ordered the construction of a triumphal arch in the centre of the grille. The design, by Fontaine and Percier, was modelled on the arch of Septimius Severus in Rome. The horses were moved to the top of this arch in 1807, though the carving of the arch itself was not completed until 1809. The arch and grille provided a monumental designed enclosure to the regulated space of the Tuileries courtyard. The best view was obtained by looking westward through the grille and arch towards the Tuileries Palace. Looking to the east was less harmonious, while the façade of the Louvre was still obscured by other buildings. To replace the horses on the empty pedestals, 4 seated and winged figures were commissioned. The northern pedestals carried sculptures of Victory by Louis Petitot. The southern pedestals bore figures representing France and history by Antoine Girard. When the horses were returned to Venice in 1815, a new chariot pulled by 4 horses was ordered from François-Joseph Boziot. A statue of peace stood in the chariot. Napoleon wanted to bring the Louvre back to life by means of such events as the exhibitions of products of French industry. The second and third of these, in 1801 and 1802, took place in the Cour Carré, by then cleared of all extraneous buildings. Here we see a nocturnal fête part of the second exhibition, looking west towards the Pavillon de l'Horloge. A temporary arcade has been erected round the courtyard. In the daytime scene of the same exhibition, it's easier to see the architecture of the Louvre. The pointed roofs of the Pavillon du Roi and the Pavillon de Beauvais, at the two corners, are still dominant features. They will be removed in 1806. The north wing on the right and the south wing on the left still match the height of the west wing. Both the left 16th century side, designed by Lescaut, and the right Louis XIII side, designed by Le Mercier. Under Napoleon, the attic levels of the north and south wings will be raised to the height of a full story to reach the height of the east colonnade wing. The change is easily seen in a photograph of the same area as it now is. In the 1801 print, it is also clear that the upper story of the Le Mercier wing has still, after 160 years, not been decorated with sculptures. They will be added under Napoleon's imperial rule. Sculptures were added at these locations in 1806. All of them were designed not to clash with Jean Goujon's Renaissance reliefs on the matching Lescaut wing. Jean Motte provided those nearest to the Pavillon de l'Horloge. Philippe Laurent Roland added those in the middle, and Denis Antoine Chaudet those nearest the north wing. Jean Motte's pediment shows the personification of law. She is flanked by busts of Thucydides and Herodotus. Law has inscribed the date 1806 in her book. What was originally written there has been incompletely erased under the Restoration. One can still faintly see the words Napoléon le Grand, Napoleon the Great. Beneath are figures of lawgivers, Moses, and Numa Pompilius, the legendary second king of Rome. The central window is flanked by the smaller figures of Isis and Manco Capac. Roland's pediment shows victory and abundance, and between them an eagle-headed shield inscribed with the Ouroboros symbol of eternity, a snake biting its own tail. Beneath them, the figures of Hercules and Minerva represent strength and wisdom. Flanking the window, the river gods of the Danube and the Nile exemplify the places of Napoleon's campaigns. Chaudet's pediment bears the winged representation of epic poetry. At each side of her there is a globe. One is a terrestrial globe, the other is ringed with the signs of the zodiac. Beneath the globes, Homer plays the lyre, and Virgil writes. Childlike figures of war and love face the window. In both these Napoleonic prints of the Cour Carrée, the 19th century clock that gives its name to the Pavillon de l'Horloge can be seen on the first floor. It was moved to the attic floor under Napoleon III when a clock was included in Le Fuel's façade of the Sully Pavilion on the west side of the building. A drawing of 1803 shows the same wing of the Louvre from the west side, the side facing the Tuileries. It is devoid of sculpture, and will remain so until the time of Napoleon III. As in previous images, the Pavillon de l'Horloge is topped with Claude Chapp's semaphore-style telegraph apparatus. Chappe invented this system in 1792. A total of 556 semaphore stations were installed throughout France, covering 4,800 kilometers, and the system remained in use for military and national communication until the 1850s. The pediment sculptures on the north and south wings, facing on to the Cour Carrée, date from 1811. On the south wing is Minerva, accompanied by the sciences and the arts, carved by Jacques Le Sueur. On the north wing is the genius of France, with the features of Napoleon. He is calling on Minerva and the divinities of peace and law to take over from Mars and the apparatus of war, which victory has rendered useless. This work is by Claude Ramé. On the east wing, the central area of Perrault's colonnade, including the pediment, remained undecorated until the First Empire. The sculptures for the pediment are by François Lemot and date from 1808. Originally, the Muses surrounded a bust of Napoleon, but the restoration provided the emperor with a wig, and he became Louis XIV. The imperial emblem of the bee has not been removed from the shield to the right. It will be noticed that the initial N between the pairs of columns has also been changed to refer to Louis. Over the central doorway, Pierre Cartellier's Victory, riding in a four-horse chariot, dates from 1810. The south façade, facing the river, also received its decoration under Napoleon. It is still undecorated in this print by Louis-Pierre Baltard, which appears to show the beginnings of the construction of the Pont des Arts. This footbridge was completed in 1801. The pediment bears an armorial representation of the armies of the empire, supported by the muses of history and science. The sculpture by Auguste Félix Fortin dates from 1809. Below the pediment, in a semicircular arch, are two genii, also by Fortin and of the same date. In the spandrels of the arch, and above it, two figures of fame crown what was once a bust of Napoleon, but is now the helmet of Minerva. This was sculpted by Antoine Léonard Dupasquier, also in 1809. The north front of the Louvre, which now faces onto the Rue de Rivoli, lacks sculpture in another print by Baltard. In 1815, the pediment gained a panoply of arms by Montpellier. Napoleon divorced Josephine, and in 1810 married the Archduchess Marie-Louise, daughter of the Emperor Francis I of Austria. Although he had already married her by proxy in a religious ceremony in Vienna, and in person in a civil ceremony in Saint-Cloud, he had a second elaborate religious ceremony and celebration in which he was able to show off both the Louvre and the Tuileries. A crowd of spectators had assembled outside the Tuileries. The Salon Carré in the Louvre was transformed into a chapel for the occasion. A procession led by the bride and groom then made its way from the Louvre to the Tuileries along the Grande Galerie. A banquet was held in the Tuileries. Then the imperial couple showed themselves to the crowd and reviewed the troops from the Tuileries balcony. The emperor revived the aim that preceding Bourbon monarchs had abandoned when in 1810 he approved the proposal of Percier and Fontaine to unite the Tuileries and the Louvre in one vast palace. Attached to the east of the Pavillon de Beauvais at the northeast corner of the old Louvre there would be a chapel, the entrance to which would match the entrance to the Napoleon Museum opposite it. The chapel would be dedicated to Saint Napoleon, newly invented in 1806 for politico-religious reasons, and assimilated to Saint Neopolus, martyred under Diocletian. His feast day was the same as the Feast of the Assumption, the 15th of August, which was also the Emperor's birthday and the anniversary of the re-establishment of the Catholic Church in France after the Revolution. The chapel would be entered from the corner of a new courtyard forming a rectangle to the west of the Cour Carrée. An opera house would stand facing the Palais Royal outside the northern wing of this courtyard. From the Pavillon de Marsan, at the northern end of the Tuileries, a new wing would extend eastward, its southern courtyard side mirroring the design of the Grande Galerie opposite it. This would be the northern wing of a new quadrilateral which would go some way towards disguising the lack of symmetry caused by the fact that the Tuileries and the old Louvre were not aligned in parallel. In this painting by Horace Vernet of Napoleon reviewing his troops at the Tuileries, the beginnings of the new north wing are visible in the background. On the other side of this wing, the new Rue de Rivoli, begun in 1806, would run from the Place de la Concorde past the Tuileries Gardens. it would be extended further eastward under Charles X, Louis-Philippe, and Napoleon III. The elegant arcades, designed by Percier and Fontaine, date from 1811. The work of unifying the two palaces came to a halt after the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 and the end of the Empire. Louis XVIII did, however, add some bays to the new north wing, taking it as far as the Pavillon de Rouen. One of the architectural masterpieces that Percier and Fontaine created for Napoleon I inside the Louvre was the grand staircase of the museum. It was frequently depicted, as, for instance, in this painting by Isabey, showing visitors at the top of the staircase. It dates from 1817. The painting most often reproduced places the architects on that staircase, displaying their plans to Napoleon. The painting dates from 1833, and anachronistically includes a ceiling which was not created until 1819, after the end of the Empire, when Napoleon was in exile on St. Helena and King Louis XVIII on the throne. The same ceiling is shown in a painting of 1835 by Jean-Louis Badenier. The ceiling is still there in the Salle Percier et Fontaine on the top floor, though the staircase itself was demolished under Napoleon III and replaced by what is now the Daru staircase. The painting by Charles Meunier depicts France in the guise of Minerva protecting the arts. There are also numerous engravings of the lost staircase. The grandeur and magnificence of the lost structure can be judged from the rooms named after its architects, the Salle Percier et Fontaine, which retain the original decoration. The staircases at either end of the colonnade wing of the Cour Carrée were also created by Percier-Fontaine for Napoleon, but completed under Louis XVIII. They have the same monumentality as the grand staircase, and were intended to be as richly decorated. This decoration was, however, never completed, so that the architecture, though impressive, remains monochrome, and the effect is sober and austere. Attacked by all the powers of Europe, with Paris in the hands of his enemies, proclaimed deposed by Talleyrand, Napoleon abdicated in April 1814. Talleyrand was already negotiating for the return of the Bourbons with Louis XVI's brother as King Louis XVIII, and Napoleon was relegated to the Mediterranean island of Elba, retaining his title and an annual income of 2 million francs. His warlike return to France was brief and ended in defeat at Waterloo and exile on remote St. Helena, where he arrived on the 15th of October 1815 and where he died on the 5th of May 1821.